We're going to turn now to the images that you saw here on NBC 10 nearly 2 weeks ago. Hundreds of people storming into stores, taking bags full of items during the unrest in Philadelphia.
But here's the question. Where did all these stolen goods go and who's looking for it? NBC 10 investigative reporter Claudia Vargas went to the hardest hit areas to find out.
Alarms are still going off here on Kensington Avenue, and business owners are sorting through the mess left behind by looters. Some say they don't expect to get back what was stolen. We wanted to know what law enforcement is doing to find the loot. Looters threw a rock through the glass front window of Lizzie Lynn Hair Salon. The Parkside Salon surveillance camera captured the looters rushing in. First, she empties out the display case, then she makes a dash for the back room.
They took as many lashes as they possibly could take. We keep storage of hair. They took 2 cases of hair. They took a laptop.
The salon's owner, Sean Watson, was in Orlando with his family at the time. His shop is one of 928 Philadelphia businesses that reported being looted during the George Floyd protest. Where do you think those items went?
Man, they could be anywhere. They're probably in the streets anywhere.
Watson says about $15,000 worth of hair bundles were stolen. He says he filled out a police report once he returned from Florida, but he has not heard back from Philly PD. We asked Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw whether any looted items have been recovered and given back to shop owners.
You know what, I'm not prepared to answer that at this time. Actually, frankly, I don't know the answer to that. We'll have to circle back.
So what can businesses expect from police? I mean, will they be getting any of the items that were stolen back at some point?
I would hope so. I mean, as with any crime, I think the biggest piece for us is going back and recovering evidence.
Philadelphia police have arrested more than 600 people for looting, but have not said whether any items were recovered from those arrested. Police in Colwyn tracked down dozens of looted items to an apartment: sneakers, Nike t-shirts, alcohol, and beauty supplies, much of it still with tags. The borough mayor says the goods were returned to the stores. The NBC 10 investigators found various online postings for new shoes in Philadelphia days after the looting incidents. Shoe stores were some of the hardest hit. It's unclear if the ads are for looted items. We also walked around some neighborhoods to see if looted items were being sold on the street. We found a cart full of shoes in Kensington. A guy by the name of Iris was manning it. He says some of it may have been looted by others and dropped and then picked up. He offered to sell us shoes for as low as $15.
Make a couple bucks because they're homeless and I'm homeless, and you got to do what you have to do to survive out here.
But perhaps the most concerning loot is that of prescription drugs. Nafisa and Mitch Patel own the medicine shop on Kensington Avenue. It is one of about 180 pharmacies that were burglarized during the violent protests.
Register.
The Patels say about $500,000 in drugs were stolen. If that were true for all looted pharmacies, it would be a $90 million loss in just Philadelphia. Most concerning for pharmacy owners and federal authorities is the theft of oxycodone, Percocet, and other narcotics that are highly addictive and have a high street value.
Very upsetting that things that weren't meant to be out on the street are out on the street.
DEA agents have been helping Philadelphia pharmacies assess and report what prescription drugs were stolen. Agent Pat Traynor says more than 1/3 of all Philadelphia pharmacies were burglarized. Some were wiped clean, others were more strategic thefts, with only prescription painkillers and controlled substances taken.
We've seen looters actually going through the shelves, reviewing the, trying to find drugs that have a great street value.
This is what's left of it.
In some cases, such as with the Patels, the computers where inventory is kept and security systems were also stolen. What's the likelihood that you'll be able to recover some of these stolen drugs?
Hopefully we will. As far as where they are, we don't. It's hard to say where those drugs are at this point.
Agents are working to quantify the total loss and find the perpetrators. In the meantime, pharmacies are trying to pick up the pieces and rebuild.
I don't know how to come back from it, but all we can do is try.
If the stolen pills are recovered, they will most likely be held for evidence and ultimately destroyed. They cannot go back to the pharmacies. For the investigators, I'm Claudia Vargas, NBC 10 News.
Dozens of Philadelphians say they are victims of the police department's use of less than lethal tactics during the first few days of civil unrest.
But it wasn't just protesters hit with tear gas, pepper spray, pellets, and beanbag rounds. Our investigative reporter Claudia Vargas met innocent bystanders caught in the middle between police and the protesters. We have to warn you, some of the images you're about to see are graphic.
Philadelphia police shot plastic pellets filled with paint and pepper spray at crowds of people in West Philadelphia. It is the second day of protest and civil unrest, and tensions are high. Looters are breaking into stores, and some protesters were setting cars on fire. The NBC 10 investigators' camera is rolling as police try to disperse crowds at 51st and Market. Cab driver Noor Danielle is caught in the middle. You can see him touching his head and seeing the blood on his fingers, realizing he's been shot. He goes up to the police line asking why they shot him and pointing to his taxi. Disoriented and dizzy, a few people come to his aid. Eventually, he is treated by strangers. But panic sets in for Daniel. He tries to sit up and yells for an ambulance.
Ambulance, ambulance, please!
He wasn't a protester. He was trying to get his personal items from his taxi. It had been smashed and burned by protesters.
The intersection.
We caught up with Daniel nearly 2 months later. You can still see the mark near his right temple. He's thankful he was hit with what police call a less lethal munition.
I think for the God, God, please help me. Just I think first time is a real blood.
He says he has ringing in his ear and frequent headaches.
There's a lot of the pain. I just sleeping time is and night time and morning time, all time is this is the pain.
Police also shot less than lethal rounds at protesters who descended onto 676. The next day, Police Commissioner Daniel Outlaw defended the actions.
The option of deploying tear gas was selected only when it became evident that other options were not effective.
But a few weeks later, Outlaw and Mayor Jim Kenney apologized for the use of force against those protesters on 676.
I apologize sincerely to the peaceful protesters out there on that highway on June 1st, who were simply choosing to exercise their right to speak out against injustice and institutional racism.
At that time, he did not include what happened in West Philadelphia. The mayor says the protest on 676 was different than the one at 52nd and Market Streets. He says the difference is here in West Philadelphia, there was looting and destruction to businesses and police vehicles. In a statement regarding West Philly, the mayor now says in part, I fully regret the use of tear gas and some of the other force by police in that situation as much as I do its use the following day on I-676. The police department declined to comment for this story because the incidents are under investigation. But police spokesperson Inspector Sekou Kenebru showed us the weapons the department used against protesters.
The beanbags come out of it. I mean, it would fit in here compact out of a shotgun round.
Police also used plastic pellets.
It would be pepper spray in here, and it would come out of the same thing, an air pump type, just like a paint gun.
But they're less lethal. They're not non-lethal.
Biomedical engineer Cynthia Burr consults for the manufacturers of these kinds of weapons. She says projectiles such as beanbags and pellets can cause serious injury and even death. According to Burr, the pellets and beanbag rounds Philly police used during the protest are to be aimed directly at a person, not into crowds, and they're meant to be shot at center mass or limbs.
What we were seeing across the U.S., there was a lot of head injuries, and these rounds are specifically are designed not to be shot at the head.
Dozens of protesters and residents filed lawsuits in early July alleging excessive use of force by Philadelphia police in its response to both I-676 and 52nd Street. One of the West Philadelphia residents suing the city is Crystal McBee. She says she was trying to get her granddaughter away from the crowd at 52nd and Market Street when she was overcome by tear gas and later struck by a pellet.
By the time I got to Chancery Street, turned around, a bullet came and hit me right here in my head, and it swelled up instantly.
She considers herself lucky that she didn't lose an eye.
They shouldn't have never brought the SWAT team in the neighborhood with tear gas and shooting bullets. To me, that's dangerous.
As for Daniel, he too has hired a lawyer. He's had to pay out of pocket for much of the repairs to his taxi, but he is grateful that he is still alive.
My lucky.
The Philadelphia police changed its use of less than lethal force policy, at least for the time being. The city hired an outside group to investigate the department's response to the protest. You can read Mayor Kenney's full statement on the West Philly incident. It, along with our story, can be found on NBC10.com/use of force. For the investigators, I'm Claudia Vargas, NBC 10 News.
Philadelphia's Police Advisory Commission is trying to investigate the police department's response to protests and civil unrest. But the watchdog agency says it's facing roadblocks from City Hall. Now, since investigative reporter Claudia Vargas has been asking questions, the city seems to be changing some of its processes.
The pepper spray, the tear gas, and the pellets. The use of those tools by Philadelphia police earlier this summer drew scrutiny from various agencies, including the city's Police Advisory Commission. The commission is a civilian board. It is tasked in part with investigating police misconduct and making policy recommendations. Its executive director, Hans Menno, says the police response to the recent protest fall under their purview.
We want to understand the details behind it, what has occurred, why, and most importantly, how we can avoid it moving forward. And provide a transparent accounting to the residents of the city.
On June 25th, Menno sent Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw a detailed list of records and videos the commission needs to conduct its review of the police actions during the protest. Among the requests, use of force reports, internal affairs investigation reports, and body-worn camera footage. Outlaw responded by saying that the commission would have to request the records from a consultant the city hired to conduct its own investigation into the matter. The commission would not receive any information directly from police.
It's problematic if there's ever a delay that the police department can control, because that would not be true oversight.
Nearly 2 months since his request, Mennos has yet to receive any of the records. It's not like this in other cities, many of which have had the same level of civil unrest and questionable police behavior as Philadelphia. Washington, D.C.'s Office of Police Complaints is the counterpart to Philadelphia's Police Advisory Commission. It started investigating police misconduct while the protests were going on. Michael Tobin is the executive director.
We have a monitor program where our investigators go out during the protests and monitor the police response.
Tobin could contact command staff to address issues in real time. Following the protest, the office started sorting through body camera footage and other records. The office has direct access.
The access to the video is not the issue here. It's actually the amount of time it takes to do the investigation.
New Orleans independent police monitor Susan Hudson says they too have direct access to body camera footage and other records.
We can now go in and look for whatever we want.
Tobin and Hudson say it's important for police oversight boards to have direct access to records, especially in reviewing the police response to the George Floyd protests.
As we're seeing all over the country, this is indiscriminate. They are shooting out these pellets and gas and whatnot and hitting people who aren't doing anything wrong.
Both of those cities' civilian oversight offices are deep into their review of police response to the early summer protests. Philly officials have not yet responded to a request for an interview regarding the commissioner's response to the PAC's request for records. But a day after the NBC 10 investigators started asking questions on the matter, Menno says he received a new promise.
They intend to deliver the documents directly to us, even if they previously had stated that they prefer for the documents to be delivered to us from their consultant.
The commission can't just go into the police system and grab what they need.
We don't have that access. Everything that we need, we have to request from the police department.
Philadelphia City Council wants to create a new oversight committee that would have subpoena powers. The first step for that, though, is for voters to approve a referendum in the November election. For the investigators, I'm Claudia Vargas, NBC 10 News.